User management and authentication for your web application does not have to be difficult. Today, in this video, I'm going to show you how to create and deploy a Cognito user pool using the AWS CDK. Once that's finished, we'll set our user pool to be an authorizer for an API gateway. This will allow us to authorize all of our API calls using the tokens generated by Cognito. Hi, if you're new around here, my name is Ryan. I'm an AWS certified solutions architect and developer, and my goal is to teach you modern serverless system design using AWS. Let's get it. So what exactly is Cognito? Well, Amazon Cognito is an identity platform that's offered through Amazon Web Services that helps developers add user sign-up and authentication to web and mobile applications. It effectively acts as a user directory, authentication server, and authorization service all in one. It even allows you to offer federated logins using platforms like Facebook and Google. Our use case today is going to be for a front-end web application where maybe you would want to add the ability to have users be able to sign up and then sign in, and then access a part of your website that might be members only. So let's jump in and start building that now. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is just make our directory. We'll just make directory CDK deploy Cognito API gateway. We'll CD into that directory and we'll initialize the application with CDK init app-l TypeScript. Okay, so the next thing we'll do is we'll jump into the lib directory here into our stack definition. We'll clean up the commented code and then we'll destructure the stack and stack props. Next thing we'll do is we'll declare our user pool. We'll do const user pool is equal to a new user pool imported from Cognito. Into that constructor, we're going to pass this for the context. Logical resource name, we'll just call it user pool. And then we'll pass in the props. The first of those will just be user pool name. We'll just call it my user pool. Next, we'll set self signup enabled to true. This will allow us to create a user through the command line. Next, we'll set sign in aliases equal to an object. That object, we're just going to set email to true. This will then allow us to sign in through the command line using the email that we used to sign up. Next, we will set auto verify to an object. And again, we will set email to true. This is just going to simplify our sign up process for the sake of this tutorial. And it's just going to automatically verify the email that we sign up with. Finally, since we're going to be deleting this at the end of this tutorial, we're going to set removal policy equal to a new removal policy dot destroy. Okay, next, we're going to create our user pool client and we'll set that equal to a new user pool client. Into that, we're going to pass this for the context. Logical resource name will be user pool client. And then into that, we're going to pass the props object. Into this, we're going to pass our user pool so we know which user pool to assign this client to. We will set generate secret to false. If you generate a secret for this, you will be unable to use the client ID for your web application. So you want to make sure this is set to false. And then auth flows, we will set to an object where we will set user password to true. This is going to allow us to log in via the command line, which will then allow us to generate tokens. And then we will use those tokens to be able to call our API gateway endpoint. The user pool client effectively allows us to generate a client ID, and that client ID would represent your web application. So any interfacing that you're going to do with the user pool, like signing users up or logging them in, is going to need this client ID in order to be able to communicate with Cognito. We're going to be doing everything through the command line today, but you'll see that when we send these commands, we will need to include the client ID with it. Okay, next, we're going to do a new CFN output, and into this, we'll pass this for the context. We're going to call it user pool client ID, and then we'll pass in a props object and we'll set the value equal to our user pool client dot user pool client ID. This will just output the client ID into the terminal so that we can easily copy paste it into the commands that we're going to run to sign up and sign in our user. Okay, so that finishes everything with the Cognito user pool. Let's go ahead and create our API gateway. First thing we're going to do is we're going to create our Lambda function handler. This is going to handle all requests that we make to our endpoint. We'll set this equal to a new function. Make sure you import function from the Lambda library. Into this, we're going to pass this. We'll call it my function for the logical resource name, and then we'll pass in the function props. First, we'll set runtime. Runtime will be equal to the runtime object with the static property of Node.js 20, or you can use latest here as well. Next, we will set the handler to be set to index.handler. And finally, we'll set the code property equal to code imported from AWS Lambda dot from inline. And then into this function, we're going to just pass a string of code. And I'm just going to copy paste this here, but I'll have a GitHub repository that has all of this code in it listed down in the description. But all we're doing is we're exporting a handler function, and that handler function is just going to return an object with a status code of 200. And then in the body message, we're going to return the email of whoever called the function. So this will return the email of the user that we're going to sign up into our user pool. Okay, next let's define our API gateway. So we'll do const API is equal to a new REST API, and then into REST API, we will pass this for the context. For the logical resource name, we'll just call it REST API, and we'll pass in the API props. We'll set REST API name to my REST API, very original. And then next, we're going to create our authorizer. Our authorizer is what's going to allow us to call our API gateway endpoints using the tokens that are generated from logging into Cognito. So we'll set const authorizer is equal to a new Cognito user pools authorizer. Again, this for the context, authorizer for the logical resource name. Then we'll pass in the props object, which is just going to have one key, and that's Cognito user pools. Cognito user pools is just going to be an array, and into that array, we're just going to pass our user pool that we created. All right, finally, let's create our endpoint and then hook our Lambda function up to it. We'll do const Lambda integration is equal to a new Lambda integration, where we will pass in my function that we created earlier. Next, we'll define our endpoint. So we'll do const resource is equal to API, which is our REST API, dot root, which will just be our API endpoint / add resource. And we'll just set that to hello. And all this is doing is assigning a hello endpoint to the root of our API. So it will be our API endpoint / hello. And then onto that resource, we're going to add a method. And then into add method, we're going to pass the method of get. Then we will pass in our Lambda integration to tell this endpoint to be handled by our Lambda handler. And then we will pass in some props. And in this props object, we're going to pass in our authorizer and our authorization type. An authorization type is just going to be equal to authorization type imported from API Gateway and the static property of Cognito. So this says anytime this API endpoint is called of hello as a GET request, we will respond to that with this Lambda function as long as whoever is calling the API is authorized through Cognito, specifically through our Cognito user pool that we created. Okay, now let's deploy this. If you're getting value from this, please don't forget to like the video, and then please let me know down in the comments if there's any other videos that you want to see me make. So we'll do CDK deploy -- profile Cloudmancer. If you don't know what profiles are, you can check out this video that I did on them a little bit ago. Okay, let's go. We'll confirm yes. Okay, so that finished, and we can see that the CloudFormation stack output our user pool client ID. Let's clear that out. Now let's go ahead and sign a user up into our user pool. So I'm just going to paste this into here, but we're basically going to call the user sign up command here, and I'll have all of these commands in the README for this repository that's listed down in the description. We're going to call the sign up function. We're going to pass in our client ID, our username, which is just going to be my email, a very simple password, and I'm also passing in the profile here so that it knows which account that this user pool exists in and where I want to sign the user up. Okay, perfect. So we got our response back here, and we can see that user confirmed is false. So the next command that we're going to run is to confirm the user. I'm going to hop over into my email because now that I've officially signed up, Cognito will have sent an email to me that has a 6-digit code in it. So I'm going to go get that code and then put it into our next command. Again, I just pasted this in here, but we're just going to run the confirm signup command here. We're going to pass in the client ID, our username, and the confirmation code that was sent to us, as well as our profile. We'll send that. Okay, so that went through. All right, so let's make sure everything works correctly now, and we're going to sign our new user in using the command line. If this works, it should generate some tokens for us in the response. So we're going to call the initiate auth command. We're going to pass in our client ID. We're going to say auth flow of user password auth. If you remember here up in our user pool client, we enabled the user password auth flow. Next, we'll pass in the auth parameters of our username, which is just the email that we used, and of course our password, and then profile here as well. And we'll send that. All right, perfect. So if everything worked correctly, then we should get a response back that has some tokens. You can see here that we have this access token, a refresh token, as well as an ID token. We're most interested in this ID token, so we're actually going to copy this here and we'll use it in a second. I also wanted to point out that expires in is in 3600 seconds. That's the default for Cognito, which is 1 hour. And the token type is bearer, so we know how to pass the header in when we call the API endpoint. So let's do that now. And I actually forgot to copy down our API gateway endpoint. So we'll hop here into the console and we'll jump into API gateway. We'll go to APIs and we can see our REST API that was created, and we can see its API ID here. And if we go to stages here, we can actually see the invoke URL. So this is what we're looking for. And if we hop back over into resources, we can see the root, and then we have /hello right here. And then we can see on hello, we have a get method. And if we click on that, we can see this method type, and we can see that it has a Lambda integration on it. If we click on that here, it'll take us over to Lambda. We can open index.js and we can see that inline code that we put in. Okay, so let's go ahead and curl our endpoint now. All we're going to do is curl -H. The capital H means we're going to set a header in the curl request. That header is going to be set to a string that just has authorization : and then bearer. If you remember when we got the response back after we logged into Cognito and got those tokens, it said that they were bearer tokens. And then we're going to paste in our ID token after that. that. And then after the end of the string, we're just going to have the API gateway URL / the endpoint of hello. As a side note, if you do copy paste this token into some kind of text editor, sometimes it will add some weird spaces and new lines to it. So you might have to do a little formatting. You'll know you have it correct because there won't be any spaces and it'll actually just look like one long string in your terminal. All right, so this should work correctly and we should get a response here. So let's go ahead and send it. And we can see hello and my email that I used to sign up my user into Cognito. All right, so that about wraps up the video. I hope that you found value in this. So please don't forget to like the video and then please let me know down in the comments if there's any other videos that you want to see me make. Thanks for watching.